closet, also known as the Jim McCarthy Voiceovers World Headquarters Studio. This is the JMVO Weekly Primer. Please subscribe, rate, and comment via jimmccarthyvoiceovers.com/podcast. This is episode 33 of the JMVO Weekly Primer. This podcast is about making your life better through marinating your mind in good stuff. My name is Jim McCarthy, owner, operator, and chief bottle washer at jimmccarthyvoiceovers.com. I believe that as a business owner, entrepreneur, and overall salesperson, all of us, we're bombarded by negativity every single frickin' day. And it's the last thing we need. So if you want to see your life and business change, I believe, life and business change for the better, I believe you need to start consuming nurturing good stuff. That means drive all the politics out of your life. Drive all the negative people out of your life. They say that the 5 people you hang the most with influence you the most, and you're going to become most like them. So choose wisely when it comes to who you hang out with and, of course, what you put in your mind. So it's the holidays, right? What do people do during the holidays? They talk about spending money, getting Christmas gifts, buying a whole bunch of stuff for people that they love, and that's how we show them how we love them and everything. We tend to not really think about what it means with the stuff that we work so hard to earn. A lot of people don't talk about how to make it multiply. We only think about how we can spend it, trade it in for things that we think are going to make our lives better or give gifts to other people. The guest I have today has become a master marketer. I've been watching him for the past year or so, make videos in what looked like a storeroom, but now he's actually moved up to his own studio space in his office out of Anchorage, Alaska, of all places. As we all know, they've had a major earthquake today. I'm glad that he's okay. Please welcome to the program the CEO and founder of Wealth Dynamics. Am I saying that right, I hope?
You're saying that right. You got it, Jim. Thank you for having me on.
Right on. Jerry Fetta. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Not too bad. This is the first time I've ever had an interview with my guest being in their car.
Well, hey, the roofs are falling in today. This is the safest place I could be right now. Is in my car.
That's awesome. So I've been watching you for a while, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like I see what you're doing, and I'm going, and I've always kind of taken kind of not a backseat, but I lean back and I go, let me watch how this plays out. And I like what's been playing out over the past year or so with your education and your willingness to share your information on how a lot of the stuff that I preach about and a lot of what my guests preach about, money, why is it so confusing for most people to really understand how to figure it out and make it work for them? Most Americans are taught to work for their money, spend it, and save it. And, the traditional methodologies are investments, save for retirement, whatever the hell that may mean. Mm-hmm. Your approach on things, and you're at a very young age, mm-hmm. You're about 25, late 20s, I would assume?
Yeah, 26.
26, okay. What put you on this path, first of all? How did you get to where you are? What began it, and what started driving you to do what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I've been doing finances actually since I was 18. And, I got a job right out of high school as a personal trainer. That was my dream. I was into bodybuilding. So that was my dream, was to own a gym, to be a bodybuilder. And, doing that, I was ambitious and stuff. So I got up to the very top fast, and I realized that there wasn't much room left to climb. And so I had a friend that actually was in financial services. It was a network marketing company. And coincidentally, he'd recruited me into it. And I was attracted to it because of the help. Like I was seeing, statistics like 76% of Americans are paycheck to paycheck. Average credit card debt per household is over $9,000. By the way, Alaska leads that. Alaska is number 1 in the nation. Credit card debt per capita is $13,000. So I saw the help there and really dove into the industry. And I can't even say I got it. I didn't really understand money at that point. I was just doing something that looked like a good idea. And so I went through a couple of companies, started my own company. And when I started my own company, it was actually right after my mom died. And this is a big part of my story. My mom passed away at age 60. Age 60 is when you're allowed to take money out of your retirement plan. So I was helping people put money in their 401k, and I watched the whole thing unfold exactly opposite of what I was telling people would happen, and with my own mom. And so at that point, I started realizing there's something about this that's not working. Like it's not, the plan and the story that's being told is not playing out the way that it's saying it will, and it's happening on a large scale. So I spent a lot of time learning. The path that I've taken is not one that existed prior, and so I had to do a lot of self-learning on how does money actually work, how do investments actually work, and through that I can confidently say I came to a point of mastery on the topic, and that's what I've done ever since.
At what point did you realize, you probably did it for yourself? When did you feel comfortable kind of sharing that message based on your experience? At what age?
So probably at age 24. That's when I really felt like I understood. Yeah.
So about 6 years of just figuring out it on your own and everything.
Right. And, probably 4 of those 6 years, just totally blind, doing the traditional retirement planning route, traditional methodologies, thinking it was correct because that's what my licenses said, right? I took tests that told me that was the right answer. So it took me about 2 years of self-study to really learn it and figure it out for myself and see the results. That's the big thing, seeing the actual result change. And that's when I understood that this was the right answer.
Now, I mean, you started out from doing this from within the fitness industry, making money that way, and then using that as your fuel from what that your salary or earnings from that industry, correct?
Yeah, so I did the fitness industry, and actually when I started my business up, I couldn't do both. It was competing times. So I went from the fitness industry to delivering pizza at nighttime, just completely opposite. And then I used the funds from that to start the business up.
From the pizza delivery.
From the pizza, yeah.
Oh, so you just understood that you needed, not just to cut back on expenses, but also to increase your income.
Correct.
A lot of Americans don't really understand that. They see one income source, their job. And Matt Monero and I had this conversation. I believe that, like where I am right now is people ask me what I do. I tell them I spin plates, right? I do voiceovers. I do video production. I do podcasting for many different clients. A lot of things underneath that umbrella, marketing and content creation, I guess is the best way to put it. But on the other hand, I am also the owner of a electrical company and an LED lighting company here in Tennessee that, is really starting to grow. I call it my active investment, meaning it's like my 2 full-time jobs. A lot of people don't understand that, they try to scale back on the expenses with the existing income stream. Or, what's the common thread that people fail the most at when it comes to this kind of stuff, you think?
Well, I think, Jim, the most common thread is that people don't truly understand what money is. Mm-hmm. So they think money is green pieces of paper or numbers in their bank account. And failure to understand what something is leads to failure to use it properly. Mm-hmm. And so when someone doesn't use it properly, then that creates the results that we see today in America. Credit card debt, student loan debt, mortgage crisis. No one's got money in the bank. No one's earning income, and wages have been stagnant. So it's really a financial illiteracy thing. And that's where it starts, and it results in, paycheck to paycheck. And the root of that really is, I think, someone not having purpose and commitment in their life. Because I know for me, and you're probably the same way, when money began to matter, it's when you were really committed to something. You're like, this is big enough for me to push.
What's really cool to see is that you're doing this at such a young age. Having an awareness that you have is something I wish I had at that age, for sure. Because my life at that point was all about doing, I had the opportunity to own a business and do something that I really wasn't me. Oddly enough, it was in the electrical industry, but I ended up going into radio, and radio, I chose a lot of industries that were on the decline. So radio was one of them. and it's, kind of still is, but I mean, and then the next business I got into was the car business, where I sold cars for a few years, and I tell people all the time it was one of the best educations I ever received. And that's the biggest thing is education when it comes to selling and sales and a sales process and learning how to do a great value proposition, asking the right questions. A lot of stuff that they just don't teach in school, high school, or even college for that matter. In my day, I mean, maybe if you think back to your high school days, I don't know if it's still like this anymore, but back when I went to high school, it was all about where are you going to college, And if you don't go to college, you're going to be a loser. That was kind of the framing of the argument. And for years, it was inside my head because I never graduated college. I went for a few years, and because I never graduated and got a degree, I felt like I was less than everybody else around me. And it was really amazing, but until I got into radio and started really doubling down and doing well at it, my identity was associated with it. And therefore my ego and pride started to get much better because of that. But I was never really educated with money. I just never knew how to save it. We were always a single income family, raising kids. My wife stayed home. And for years, I felt like, I still feel like I'm behind the eight ball in terms of, behind the curve. I got a lot of work to catch up. Let's fast forward, 5 years, you got a family, maybe your kids, or I don't know if you want to have kids or anything. What are some of the things you're going to start to instill in them age 5, 6, 7, 8? What are some of the things that you'd like to start, showing them that I should be showing my kids maybe?
Yeah, I think sales. Like that's the thing that kids, I think, are born with, and it gets taken away from them through just the typical socialization we go through growing up.
I would agree.
Sit down, shut up, don't touch that, don't say that, all of that stuff. So I would be pushing on that with them, and then I would be showing them what they can be rather than what they can't have and what they can't do. And I think that those are elements that really lead someone to realize possibility in life, because that's the thing kids have is imagination, and the difference between their imagination and reality is just knowing how to do it. They just don't have the life experience yet. So if you kept the imagination and gave them life experience, that's where you see great people like Steve Jobs, like Grant Cardone, like you mentioned Matt Monero, these guys that we see that are winning. That's really what they have.
Well, Matt's case was the fact that, he just had the drive he went to culinary school, and which was just a school that he figured out out of high school. Hey, it's the one that accepted me, so hey, I'll try it. But his was out of, I don't know if it was necessity, but if he had a family, my drive right now certainly is the fact that I'm the provider for the family. Identifying some sort of a purpose and driver early on is certainly key. And I would actually, those are great pointers. So, I mean, you going to get married soon, you think? I mean, well, you are married, right?
Yeah, I'm married. Been married since 2012.
That's right. So you got married early.
Yeah. I did.
6 years ago. Wow, man. Good for you.
Yeah.
Lexi, right?
Yes.
Very cool. You guys ever going to move down into the contiguous 48, or are you going to stick up in Alaska?
We're thinking about it. We want to get down. We want to still live up here and have a few different places. We really do like it up here, but right. Days like this, we're like, man, a beach in Florida with no tsunamis would be great.
But you know what? Tsunamis would be one thing. Beach in Florida, you got to worry about hurricanes. There's always something, We moved to Tennessee, and, wait, what could happen in Tennessee? I lived in Las Vegas, Nevada. I lived in Danbury, Connecticut, and, New York City area. Not too much, really. We had snowstorms and everything up there. We moved out to Vegas. We had, it never rained, but we had the possibility of an earthquake, which never happened. And then we move out to Tennessee, and we're like, oh, what could possibly happen? We got seasonal weather all year round. What could possibly happen in Tennessee? First year we were here, I didn't realize how tornadic it was. It is. We get tornadoes here like crazy. It's nuts. But with the earthquake today, this is really kind of not waking you up, but I mean, first of all, what's the extent of it? How many people are there? A lot of buildings that are damaged at all, or how's it kind of panning out?
Yeah, so there's not really no casualties, nothing like that. Probably every building has got some cracks in it somewhere. Mm-hmm. We did lose a couple of roads. We had a few bridges collapse. They so the iPhone alert comes up, right? And so the earthquake hits, and then everyone with an iPhone gets an alert that says there's going to be a tsunami in 30 minutes.
Right.
And like Anchorage, we're right on the coastline. Like I can walk to the ocean here. And most people that live here, some of them are very, I guess they've got their feet beneath them when it comes to like geology and where they're at within like the terrain and stuff. And a lot of people don't. So they didn't realize like there's not a possible way there could be a tsunami and have it make an effect on Anchorage. So we had people driving for the mountains, going out to the valley, and it was an interesting morning. It took you about 2 hours to get anywhere today.
So basically nothing came to shore, it sounds like.
No, I mean, we had some road damage, and that was about it.
I saw some of the social media posts from you today. You were talking about how people are checking out, not working, and going to use the earthquake as an excuse not to work.
They didn't want to work anyways. They're just like, this is it.
I can check out early weekend.
Yep.
So this is interesting because, an earthquake, metaphorical, right? Today we had a meeting with all our the intricate people and key people in our business, probably about a 2-hour meeting talking about the structure of the business and where we want to go with it. And we were talking about it, building a house on rock rather than sand. So it's kind of interesting that today we're talking about this earthquake, and it's coincidental that we're having this podcast today because a lot of people aren't prepared for that earthquake, And I always tell people, Matt Monero and I talked about this the last time, he's, I think he's about 5 or 6 years older than I am, but both he and I lived through several economic corrections. Thankfully, the last time around 2008, I was working for the radio station. It was a cash heavy company. They could weather the storm. We didn't have to do any furloughs or layoffs. They actually just kind of docked our pay by about 5%, which was not much to ask from us. I was more than fine with that. But a lot of people, when the economic correction comes, the earthquake, if you will, they're not going to be prepared. Geological foundation is that they're standing on. Is that something you guys talk about in your trainings?
Oh yeah, I mean, what we talk about a lot is studying the traits of the top 1%. And there was a graph that I saw several years ago, and it was something that changed my life. And it shows different wealth classes in America. And it starts in 1920, it goes all the way to 2010, and it shows the top 1% of wealth. It shows the next 10% spread, and then it shows the bottom 90% of America. And this graph is measuring the percentage of income saved. And so you can actually see during the Great Depression, during the 1970s, during 2001, during 2008, during all these economic crises that we had. And there's a trend. And so what the trend is basically during the booms, the top 1% of income earners are saving at least 40% of their gross income at all times. And if you look at the graph from the trend from point A to point B, their income and wealth goes up. If you look at the next 10%, they save typically 20% of their income, 10 to 20%, and their trend is down. And the difference there, and then you look at the bottom 90, they're flat the whole time. Like they save 3 to 5% of their income tops, and it never goes beyond that. But the trend that
is it because they're a lack of income, or just they're spending their money too much?
I mean, I think it's ultimately lack of income and lack of financial intelligence. But what we see on this trend is basically like Great Depression, right? First thing I see on the graph, the top 1%, they go from 40 sub-zero down into debt. And I wasn't financially educated at the time, so I was like, shoot, they got hit hard. Like, I wonder what happened. These guys were winning, all of a sudden they fell off the horse. And I realized that was their savings. So they didn't get hit hard, they just stopped saving money and also went into debt. And what I realized was they had already been saving, and they took all of their savings and they bought everything. And if you look at the bottom 90% of income earners, their savings dipped in the roaring 20s. And then when the depression happened, their savings increased. Mm-hmm. So like today, we have this earthquake. Nobody woke up expecting it to happen, but there was people lined up at gas stations. They're, buying stocks of food and water. At that point, it's too late. Like if you're doing that, there could be another one when you're in the store buying the water, and that might be the last water you buy. Financially, same thing. If you're saving after the fact, it's too late. Like it's you should already had that figured out ahead of time. So to go back to your question about that, I think that really is the thing, is people aren't thinking like, hey, we're going to have another crash. They're thinking it's good, it's going to stay good.
But a lot of people are talking. I mean, a lot of the things that I listen to, I almost, even with Grant for a while there, it was like a doomsayer, and he was like, oh man, it's going to be happening any month now. I'm like, dude, stop. I don't need to hear about it. I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm aware that this is not going to last forever. I know that this is a blissful economy right now. It's a peacetime economy. I'm trying to create my reserve account. We're stacking and racking. We're in accumulation mode to prepare for when that time happens, that things can be bought for pennies on the dollar. Because that's, it's almost like, the majority of the wealth is made at the birth of nations. And in this case, a nation can be that time period that we're going to go to when the adjustment is over, whether it's a recession or, God forbid, another depression. You come out of it prepared to buy up all the stuff that people are selling because people are panicking. You know, and I think that's a lot of what happens. And there's another element to this. It's funny that you bring it up, the nature of preparation. I had a friend of mine the other day. I talked to him. He said, hey, I got a guy that would love to be on your podcast. He just wrote a book. He's a prepper, and he would love to probably get up in there and promote your book. And I said, well, the nature of my show is to marinate your mind in good stuff. And he says, well, it's good stuff in the sense that it's always good to have a mindfulness of being prepared for what the biggest failures in history. Okay. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. I guess that we can kind of spin it that way, but it's funny that you bring that up with the metaphorical earthquake that happened today. Not the literal earthquake, but we're talking about a metaphorical earthquake that happened in people's bank accounts and the economy. I brought this up in another conversation. The nature of a recession, the nature of an economic depression is 90% groupthink. Does that make sense? Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that because you can look at classes of people that in a groupthink recession don't go into the recession, which means that they're individualist and it doesn't have to be me. So I think you're 100% on that.
But I'm thinking with the advent of social media, the next time, like let's say we have another 2008. We back then, 10 years ago, didn't think to use social media to start getting the message out there to people. Listen, yeah, there are elements of the economy that had to be corrected. We have to go through this. But there wasn't anybody in the wilderness. There wasn't a voice calling out from the wilderness saying, no, you don't have to participate in this. All this is a ceasing of spending. The economy has ceased flowing, right? That's a decision made by an enormous amount of people because the media is fueling it, right?
Yeah.
So you think it's possible that, next time, the economy's got to correct. Things just naturally have to happen. It's cyclical, but I'm actually planned to be one of those voices. I'm like, no, just don't participate. Spend money, find local businesses, make sure we got cash flow going because you can shorten this thing, right? I think that's entirely possible. I
think so. And it really is just a group think, like you said. So when somebody goes through a recession, it is because they've basically, like you said, they tighten their flows up. They're no longer spending. They're no longer letting money out. Same concept as a traffic jam. Like one dude stopped when everyone else should have been driving. Because of that, everyone had to stop, and then everyone does stop because everyone did stop.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to that. In Nashville, we got the accordion effect. If someone, we have wrecks here constantly now, but that's a great analogy. Another great metaphor. This is like the most metaphorical show we've ever had. Dropping metaphors. Maybe I should call the show that. Brad Lee's got dropping bobs, dropping metaphors. It's the metaphor squad. No, it doesn't have a ring to it. It's not as sexy as Bomb Squad, but it's still one of those things that I mean, someone gets into a crash, it kind of a crash in an economic sense. Tips off things, but I mean, then you got the media that just runs with the ball. They finally got a good boogeyman that they can strike in the hearts of every man and woman and child, the fear that they should have. And that's all it is. You know, I tell the pizza story all the time. My father, back in the 80s, it was the roaring 80s, I called it. I was in my tens and teens at that point in life. And he had a great run of it. He had a great run of being in a very successful business. And I don't know what the details were of their economics, their finances at the time, because I was too young. They didn't share that willingly with us. But I don't think he probably planned all that well, but he saw it coming. He would talk about the adjustment in the 90s that was due to come. It was almost like prophecy. And sure enough, the 1990-91 recession happened. It hit us very hard. And I tell people all the time the pizza story where, we brought the business into the house. I was oddly enough putting up a light fixture up on top of a ladder. And I looked down at him and said, "Hey, let's get a pizza today." And he goes, "Well, we can't." "Okay, why?" "Can't afford it." This is after buying, $100,000 motorhomes, $30,000 boat. I mean, we had toys and all that stuff. We couldn't afford a pizza. It was nuts, man. It was tough. He was 50.
Yeah.
That sucked. And he had to go back to installing phone systems and repairs and all that stuff. It's something I'll never forget. But, man, it was crazy. And then, of course, you had the internet bubble that burst 9 years later or so, 10 years later. But what do you remember about 2008? Because I think you were 16 at the time, correct?
Yeah, I would have been 16. I was a sophomore in high school. And it didn't hit Alaska too hard. We were pretty removed at that point from the economy. A lot of our stuff's based on oil. And there's a lot of government and medical up here. So, I remember hearing about things on the news, and like you said, media. So I remember hearing things on the news about, people losing their homes, the market crashing. And that was, 16. At 18, I became a financial advisor. And so I was kind of fresh out of that. And I probably didn't really learn what happened till I was 22 or 23.
Right.
And that's when I looked back and started studying what caused it. So I saw all the surface stuff, and it's just kind of hearsay because it didn't really happen up here in Alaska. But, looking back on it, seeing the trend and realizing, next time it probably will happen up here. But seeing, what the root causes were and being able to index those, when those things start happening again in other areas, it's easy to tell when the next one's going to start happening.
Do you think that you got a handle on top possibly when the next one will start happening?
It's hard to say. Like you said, for a while, everyone was kind of pushing on it, and it's been just the rubber band. So rightfully so. I mean, it should have already happened statistically. It hasn't yet. And that's just because, our Federal Reserve is doing a great job of kicking the can down the road. But at some point it will. And I don't think it can be more than in the next 2 to 3 years, but I might just be another guy 5 years later that said it's going to happen and it hasn't happened yet.
Is it going to be as catastrophic, you think, as 2008? I mean, everybody's trying to look for a bubble somewhere. If you've seen the movie The Big Short.
Yeah.
Great movie. One of my favorite movies. Very few people were seeing, Ron Paul was one of the guys seeing what was going on and say, this is unsustainable. We can't keep on giving out loans to people that can't afford to pay it back at, adjustable interest rates. What is happening now, do you think? I mean, a lot of people talk about student loans, maybe that being a bubble.
Yeah.
Anything that comes to mind?
I think that definitely comes to mind. I mean, you look at student loans, you're giving 18-year-old kids with no income a multiple 5 and sometimes 6-figure loan with the promise to pay it back. And there's no way out of a student loan. When you sign on that thing, like you're taking that to the grave. If your parents co-sign, they're going to take over it when you pass away. So at some point, I mean, the student loan crisis, I think, will be a thing. I also see medical as something. And one thing that's really interesting, not many people have caught this, but back in 2008, we did all that quantitative easing. And basically, there's a graph. There's a graph that shows the amount of money that was printed. And then if you put that graph over the S&P 500, they're almost the same thing. So the stock market definitely still isn't a bubble. If you just influx fake money into something, of course, it's going to go up. Housing is there. I don't think housing is going to be as bad, but that definitely is something right now, especially here in Alaska. We're overbuilt. We're throwing up so many houses.
Really?
So there's a lot of things out there that could potentially be it, but it's always hard to predict what the catalyst will be, right? And so I think that's where people are struggling, is what's the needle? If it's a bubble, which one's going to pop it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned healthcare, because we're at the point as a family that we recently, analyze. We're at that fun time of year where your spending goes up because it's Christmas time, but it's also open enrollment for healthcare, and then you find out how much these insurance companies are going to gouge you for. We decided to take a drastically different direction, and based on the conversation we had with our representative at the time that was, doing this selling and consulting of the health insurance plans and yada, 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 the plan I came up with, and I said, why are we going to spend so much money a month, right? That's just going to we're lighting it on fire for the gamble. It's a pretty big risk, in this day and age with everybody getting sick and how sick we are as a nation. But again, when you have mortgage-sized premiums to pay for health insurance, and then you have an out-of-pocket, like what we were quoted, of $15,000 a person. Are you out of your freaking mind? For what? Now you're starting to see providers just completely circumvent the insurance providers, the insurance companies. They're just saying, screw it. You know what? We'll do your well visits. We'll do this. We'll do that. Try and get some sort of Aflac-esque type of coverage for catastrophic type of things, and try and negotiate as a cash buyer for your provider ahead of time, because that's music to their ears right now. They have no insurance to deal with. They have no insurance companies to deal with, no processing, no office help, no claims to process or anything. They just simply go ahead and we're going to pay you. Let's just make a deal, right? It's almost like old school. Yeah. I'm betting that some of these providers will start making house calls again. Is you good? Sorry. Daughters, gotta love it. So they had basically, is that something that you see that's trending, where people are starting to kick insurance companies out of the equation? Because I feel like I'm on the front end of something with my thinking. I'd rather keep my money than hand it over to somebody that I can't get it back. And by the way, if I have a claim, I got to cough up another $15,000. I'm like, why? How does that make sense?
I think you're dead on with that. So like for me, we have we don't even do traditional insurance. I'm on like a share plan. So I pay $80 a month. If something bad happens, I'll pay $10,000 and they'll cover the rest for me. But I've even seen doctors here in Alaska that are starting to do the house call thing again, and it's maybe subscription based. But I think it's a good way for medical providers who are willing to run a business to start expanding and maybe take some of the money away from larger institutions.
Well, I think that's what's happening. A lot of them are, I think for like $150, hey, we'll cover your entire family. And now they have video technology that if your kid has a sniffle or something like that, you just got to bring them in to get a diagnosis and a prescription. They'll do it right over your phone on video. Yeah. That's what's happening. Yeah. So, it's the pain of staying the same becoming greater than the pain of change in that particular market. So insurance companies might be getting a comeuppance here in that sense.
So. Yeah, I think that's definitely a bubble. I think college is kind of heading the same direction. And you mentioned technology with insurance. One of the programs that I've used before is, you mentioned Grant Cardone University. I didn't go to college. Almost everything I know I owe to doing that program. And even if you did look at other programs, like, maybe they're more focused on culinary arts or linguistics or something like that. I think the concept of going to a brick and mortar location to listen to somebody teach, I think that's going to be a dead concept soon. So there's a lot of things happening. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, to see how it plays out. Now, you had mentioned at 18 going into being a financial professional, financial advisor. Mm-hmm. Those initial customers you had, you're 18 years old. They had to have looked at you and said, you're 18. You're going to advise me on financial. Did that happen a lot?
Said that. That happened a lot initially.
I bet.
I mean, for probably the first 2 years, I really struggled, and it was all up here, right? Like it was me telling myself, like, you're 18, no one's gonna listen to you. And I had a mentor at the time, and he mentioned, look at LeBron James and Tiger Woods. They both signed multi-million-dollar shoe contracts with Nike, and he's like, Jerry, do you honestly think Nike asked, like, what are we gonna do? They're 18. And the answer was no. And he said, basically the only difference is they were that good. If you're that good, nobody cares. And so that was something I struggled with for a while. At some point it clicked, and I remember getting my first $1 million check from a client at the age of 21. And that was the most money I'd ever seen, let alone held. And at that point I realized, like, dude just handed me $1 million on a handshake. It was no different than all the other deals I'd done. It just had more zeros behind it. Same kind of interaction. Everything was the same. And the only difference was, like, the numbers. There's just more numbers behind it. And that changed something for me mentally.
So that's when you realize that, I know what I'm doing at this point. And you had kind of a confidence switch.
Definitely.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned that you would hear, and I heard this on a podcast the other day with Brad Lee. When you start doubting yourself, he says, find out who that voice is coming from. And it was an interesting concept when he brought it up. And I said, I was listening, and he elaborated on it. He says, if your voice says, I can't do this, then that's coming from you. But if you hear a voice saying you can't do this, that's coming from somewhere else. I'm like, that's really interesting, man. Wow. Because everybody, I think, can relate to that.
I think so. And I think a lot of times, because you mentioned, like, marinating good stuff. I think a lot of times people don't always get good stuff from others, because not everyone's marinating in good stuff. So they'll get bad stuff from others, but we all want to be good people. So we never address and be like, dude, that guy's negative. Or maybe it's a relative. This person's being negative to me. We'll try and not call that out, and we won't confront it, because we're trying to be a good person, not make them wrong. But what you just said, when I learned that was a couple of years back. Like, most of the things that I would think about myself that were negative weren't mine. Like, I did not come, like, as a baby, I did not come out of there saying I can't do stuff. There's all the other stuff that was added. So that's some real confronting to do, like realizing who those people are and segregating, like, I can still love them and have a relationship, but also they're full of bullshit. Like, I can't listen to some of the things they say.
Well, who was, some of the people in your mind that kind of have those voices? Who are they? And, well, not who are they, but I mean, how did you kind of overcome that? I mean, does it still kind of, because I mean, I can relate to that. I hear, there are things that I want to do, and I hear, like, voices of my mother going, just doubt, you know what I mean? And well, you always got to have something to fall back on, all that stuff. And just, I don't know. Does that make sense? I mean, when I'm asking that, just like, what kind of things were being said?
A lot of it was just the message of safety and security, like being preached about, like, hey, be safe, be secure. Another one for me, not to get too controversial, I'll go ahead and do it though, but it was religion. I grew up in church. There's a lot of, like, non-provable stuff and ideas that people have and enforce. And so there's a lot of that where there's just like fences, like, you just can't go that way. That's not something you do. It's not something you talk about. Money was one of those things, right? Money, sex, all of those things that people always are going to do in life. So those were some areas that for sure, like, there was some doubt there. And I was told something, actually, I think I heard initially when I did bodybuilding, I studied a guy named Frank Zane, and he's a 1970s championship bodybuilder. And he wrote an article, and in the article he said, when somebody says something negative about you, they're really identifying something they see in themselves in you that they can't handle, and they're talking about themselves. And so when I actually took that to heart, then I was like, all right, if someone's saying you can't do it, they're literally saying you can't do it, and they're telling that to themselves. It's a monologue. I don't have to listen to it.
I have a story about that. It's funny that you bring that up. That happened to me the first night I went on the air in radio. I was working for an electrician at the time in my day job. And the guy I was working with was in charge of their traffic light division. He had a pretty easy job, not easy, but, very, not I guess, comfortable for him. He enjoyed it. He was outside all day in the sun, but he had aspirations of being a professional baseball player. Those aspirations petered out because he hurt his arm. Doctor told him he'd never play professionally. He could play recreationally, but as it turns out, and as he got into what he was doing, his arm re-healed and was stronger than ever. And he could have been a contender. So that was one of those weights he was carrying. And this is back in the day that you didn't have social media. There was no personal branding. It was all, the gatekeepers making those decisions for you. So we were talking all day about radio because I was always, after my shift ended at the electrician, I would go to the radio station and, do production, do voiceovers. He would ask me how it worked, and I would tell him best that I knew about how the industry worked and, moving up in it and everything. And at the end of the day, when we came back to the shop and we were getting ready to go home, he looks right at me. He goes, "You'll never be on the air." And I'm going, the hell was, where did that come from, dude? Really? Yeah. So, I'm like, okay, whatever, pack up my stuff, went up the road to the radio station, started doing my thing. It was weird, a weird chain of events, because the program director that day, his wife got sick. He ended up going home. A good buddy of mine now, he's a great buddy. I just had a conversation with him. He was the night guy, the evening guy after the program director shift. He had to then fill in for the program director. The guy who filled in for him, we couldn't get a hold of. And it literally came down to, okay, who's left in the building? Can we get the janitor? We'll put the janitor on the air. I was in the production studio doing my thing. He pops in. He says, "Hey, you want to be on the air?" And I go, "Oh, yeah, eventually." He's like, "No, now." So that was my first night on the air. Oddly enough, the same day that guy told me that. And it was funny because the next day I came in and someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, were you on the air last night?" And the dude was right. It was like such a sweet moment. The dude was right there. And I'm like, yes, I was. It was crazy. But a lot of what you're doing now, the people that have had doubts that you still hear their voices, or maybe you've cast them out and they're still in your life, what do they think of what you're doing now? Because obviously you've had a track record of success.
Yeah, so we have some people that are fans now. So a percentage of those people are now fans, clients, they're following us. And then I do have some of them where they still... They're sulking. I mean, they're still upset that it didn't go down like they thought it would, and that's totally fine. So I'm not an antagonizer, so I'm never going to be negative towards somebody. I try and keep communication with those people positive. Even if it's on social media and they throw a negative post down or comment down, I'm always going to say something, find something nice in what they said. Even if they were like, "Your dad's ugly," or "You look like your dad and he's ugly," like, at least I look like my dad. Like, I'm going to find that little bit and be like, "Thank you. That's awesome. I appreciate that." Yeah. So
it's funny because a lot of that stuff early on must have driven you to do what you're doing and continue to do what you're doing.
And initially it did. Now it doesn't so much. There was a point for me where a switch flipped, and I learned about what my potential was, and that drives me now. Like there's not even really a tangible thing in the universe that drives me. It really is, what can I do? It's a game at this point, and in a game, you're going to have spectators, you're going to have opponents. Like, those are all just ingredients of a game.
Right. How transparent do you want to be about your present financial situation? Because I'm going to ask you a question.
Let's do it.
Okay. Single-digit millionaire?
At this point, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. 10 years from now, where are you going to be?
10 years from now, my vision for my company is we're going to be doing $60 billion a year in revenue. I'd like to have 200,000 or more licensed agents.
Well, you talk about specific. I love it.
Got to be specific.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, absolutely. Do you do vision boards and things of that nature?
I do. I've seen some people do some crazy vision boards. I'm not a very artistic person, so I scratch my goals down every morning and every night, and that's kind of like my vision board. I am trying to get better about keeping good pictures around, pictures of things. Like, my background on my phone is a picture of the Swiss Alps. I want to have an estate in Switzerland sometime. So that keeps me excited when I see that.
What was the turning point for you, other than the $1 million check, where you were able to really treat yourself to something nice? What was it?
I would say it was probably when I started really learning how to sell. It was in 2015, and it was a Grant Cardone course, and I took this course called Millions on the Phone, and we had just moved from Alaska to Minnesota. Literally like sold everything. I'd never seen the apartment we purchased before we got down there, so like we signed the lease agreement and just drive down, and I had a list of 100 names. Didn't know anybody. 100 square foot office with no windows, and did not even have a vehicle yet. And so all I had was that list and that course. And so I got on the phone and started banging out calls, and I started seeing business come through. And that was the first point I can remember, like being able to go out to eat and not worry about the bill. Being able to pay cash for your vehicle, which now I think is a terrible idea, but at that time that was what I was doing. So I paid cash for a vehicle. And that was,
what do you believe about vehicles?
I think they're freaking liabilities, man. Why would you put 10 grand into something that's going to turn into 4 grand in the next 5 years?
So do you do leasing?
I lease my vehicles. Yeah. Lease them and write them off.
Right. I gotcha. It's funny because when I sold cars, we had a cash or finance, very low lease penetration, I guess is what they call it. And we had training from Mercedes-Benz Financial about lease penetration and how to start talking about leases. And it was eye-opening. It really started. It made me think about, all the things that Dave Ramsey talks about. And it's like, a lot of that stuff just doesn't make sense. And I have another story about that. It was very interesting. You were associated with him at one point? Dave
Very
Ramsey.
closely. Yeah, so I was, they had a program called Endorsed Local Providers. So basically I was their investing endorsed local provider, and I was in about 5 states. We did that for 2 or 3 years. And, and it was good. Like I understand Dave's message. I get what he's trying to do. My focus is getting people out of the middle class and into wealthy. And when someone's on that plan, the most they're going to be is upper middle class. It's just not something that expands at plateaus.
Well, wrapping up, because we're going to almost about an hour now, I want you to give me some takeaways during the holiday season that people should be thinking about, okay? Maybe even pivoting towards the new year after everything kind of calms down and now they got to focus on paying off credit card bills after they stacked them up. What are some things that people can kind of gnaw on and digest that you would give as like little wisdom nuggets for the holiday season?
Yeah, so I would say, if it can't be deducted on your taxes and it can't pay you income, don't put it on a credit card. That's just a terrible idea. And the other thing too is basically, like, if you're struggling to buy Christmas presents, you need to increase your income. Like, at the end of the day, that's what you need to do. And most people are trying to do the right thing. They love their families. They want to provide good gifts. And I would say take that same line of thinking that would cause you to spend money you don't have for someone you love, to maybe expend time, energy, and focus and creativity that you don't feel like you have to make some extra money for those people too. Because your kids are going to be much more happy about not having to care for you when you're older, having college paid for, seeing you win financially, having a legacy passed down, than they will be about whatever you picked out at Christmas this year. So I would say keep the long term in mind and don't get so caught up in Christmas. Obviously, don't not buy Christmas presents. Don't be like, Jerry told me not to do this. But keep in mind, like, it's probably going to break in 2 years. You're going to buy him another one.
Let me ask you this. What can people do day to day? Maybe they wake up tomorrow and one thing that they could start doing that could become habitual over the next 30, 60, 90 days to start doing. What would you recommend?
Yeah, I would say 2 major things. So write your goals down first thing in the morning and first thing at night, and then check your bank account statement, whether it's on your phone or online, twice a day.
Twice a day?
Do that twice a day. If you do that, you've got your goals in front of you first thing in the morning, and you're always looking at your money. And if that is a consistency, you're going to start having those things grow. Like, you'll see the goals happening and you'll see the bank grow.
I've always heard about the goal thing, and I tried to do it. I struggle with trying to make it a habit, and I don't know what my problem is. Maybe I'm an old dog and it's tough to teach me new tricks, but that's something I really need to work out. What is a good piece of, like, what do you do? How do you do it? And what's the mindset that you write them down in the morning and then you go over them at night and write them down as well?
Yeah, so I think I struggled with it for a while. I think the main struggle is the definition between a goal and a target. So I think a lot of people, when they're writing their goals down, it's actually a to-do list. And ain't nobody excited about a to-do list. They're not thinking like, I can't wait to have to go check the mail today or make 50 calls. So like the goals are like these gigantic, audacious, like, you know, when I'm writing mine down, I'm thinking about every area of my life. So I'm writing down spiritual goals, I'm writing down mental goals, I'm writing down physical, money, business, all of this stuff, right? And it's all giant. And so it inspires me first thing in the morning. But the other mindset behind it is I do a lot of hard stuff that I don't like doing almost all day, every day. And I'm reselling myself on it every time I write my goals down. So I'm making sure like I'm keeping the payoff in front of me so that I can go forth and do those actions.
What are some of the hard stuff you talk about? Like what?
Oh man, so I probably do at least 100 contacts on the phone a day, and I don't care who you are, nobody likes that. Working with people like staff, we've had to fire people in the last couple of weeks. Like nobody wants to fire somebody right before Christmas. So if you don't keep the goals in front of you, like you might falter and you might compromise because you don't think about, you know, what am I actually going for here? You might get caught up in this little game of, well, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings, but really it's not good for them and it's not good for the company and it's not going towards the goal. Or it could be easier to just not make the calls. Like I could either hit a button and put it next to my ear or not.
So when you come across that threshold of you either do or do not, what do you tell yourself to get on the horse and go?
Just be ethical.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you know the right thing, just do the right thing. I don't do a lot of like mental pump up. For me, it is ethics. I'm either an ethical person and I keep my word, or I'm not. And there's nothing like exteriorly that's going to change that about myself. It's just it's a binary thing for me.
Ethical to yourself, you mean?
Ethical to myself. I know what my own agreements are, and I need to keep to those agreements.
That's amazing. 26 years old, dude. That's you are eons beyond most people your age. Years, decades. When that comes up, what do you tell people? You know, well, when your age comes into it, it still has to, I would imagine.
It really doesn't.
Really?
At this point, and I know it's because I know my stuff, I probably spend 2 to 4 hours a day on personal development. And
I got you.
At a certain point, like I don't even think about my age anymore. I wake up, I don't know what day it is. So I don't have time to think about my age either. So hey, it doesn't really come up.
Are you in the, is it like 24-hour darkness where you are now? Or almost?
No, so we'll probably, it's getting dark now. We'll probably have like, winter solstice is this month, and we'll probably have the longest darkness day is like 19 hours.
Right.
And then it'll start getting back to normal, right? But it'll start getting more light out, you know, March, April.
I was up in Anchorage in August of 2006, and it was when the sun went down at like 10:30 at night, which I found amazing.
Summertime is incredible. Yeah.
I bet. Well, Jerry, thanks for being on. I'm going to wrap it up. I forgot to bring this up at the beginning. The JMVO Weekly Primer is brought to you by Big Dot Lighting. If you have LED lighting needs in your commercial space, please give us a call. Give us, hit us up on the internet, bigdotlighting.com. We've got the lamp plan that's rolling out, which means you can make it an operational expense versus a capital project improvement. And, of course, we can also identify some potential tax credits through the 179D tax code. So bigdotlighting.com for all your commercial facility LED upgrading needs. And I shouldn't even put it that way, but I say needs anyway. Bigdotlighting.com. Jerry, thanks so much for being on with me. How do people find you and follow you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on social media at Jerry Fetta. It's like the cheese with 2 T's in it. You can also go to wealthdynamics.com. That's DYNAMX.com. And if you just Google me, I'm everywhere. I mean, we're doing everything everywhere, so it's not going to be too hard.
It's like the cheese with 2 T's. I love it.
2 T's, twice as good.
That's awesome, dude. But man, I've always, I always liked you from the first minute I met you. And of course, if you're ever in Nashville, you got a place to stay. Let's make sure we get together and grab a steak dinner or something, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Jim.
This is the JMVO Weekly Primer. Please subscribe, rate, and comment via JimMcCarthyVoiceovers.com /podcast.